I haven't used willpower in 3 years. Not once. And that's exactly why I'm more disciplined than almost everyone I know. Sounds backwards, doesn't it? That's because everything you've been taught about discipline is neurologically wrong. You think discipline is about resisting temptation, grinding through pain, forcing yourself to do things you hate. That's not discipline. That's torture. And your brain will fight you every single step of the way because you're working against millions of years of evolutionary wiring. Here's what nobody tells you. Truly disciplined people don't experience temptation the way you do. Their brains literally process desire differently. They're not superhuman. They're not more motivated. They've just hacked their nervous system in a way that makes discipline feel automatic, almost effortless. Think about that for a second. What if the reason you keep failing isn't because you're weak or lazy, but because you're using the wrong strategy entirely? What if I told you there's a way to rewire your brain so that disciplined behavior becomes your default setting, not something you have to constantly fight for? That's exactly what this video is about. I'm going to show you 12 neurological strategies that make discipline so natural, so automatic, that going back to your old self becomes practically impossible. These aren't motivational speeches or productivity hacks you'll forget tomorrow. These are evidence-based interventions that restructure how your brain processes temptation, effort, and reward. By the end of this video, you'll understand why traditional discipline advice fails most people and what you need to do instead. But here's the warning. Once you implement these systems and your brain starts rewiring itself, there's no going back. You'll look at your old self and wonder how you ever lived that way. You'll watch other people struggle with basic self-control and realize they're fighting a battle you no longer have to fight. This transformation separates the top 1% from everyone else. So if you're ready to become unfairly disciplined, let's start with the most counterintuitive truth about self-control: the temptation immunity paradox. Here's something that will break your brain. The most disciplined people you know aren't constantly resisting temptation. They barely experience temptation at all. While you're white-knuckling your way through every decision, fighting urges all day long, they're cruising through life on autopilot. And no, it's not because they have better genetics or stronger willpower. It's because of something neuroscientists call high-trait self-control, and it works completely differently than you think. Most people believe discipline is about resistance. You see the cookie, you want the cookie, you fight the urge, you win or lose. That's low-trait self-control. It's exhausting because you're in a constant state of internal warfare. Your prefrontal cortex is battling your limbic system every single moment, and that battle drains massive amounts of mental energy. But people with high-trait self-control don't fight those battles because the battles never start. Their brains have been rewired to not generate intense desires in the first place. When they see the cookie, the desire signal is weak, almost non-existent. It's not that they're suppressing the craving. The craving literally doesn't form with the same intensity. This is the paradox. True discipline isn't about getting better at resisting temptation. It's about engineering your nervous system so you stop feeling tempted. Think about what this means. Every time you resist something through sheer force of will, you're actually reinforcing the neural pathway that creates desire. You're teaching your brain that this thing is valuable, worth fighting over, worth thinking about. The resistance itself strengthens the temptation circuit. That's why willpower-based discipline feels like pushing a boulder uphill forever. You never get easier. You just get tired. But when you stop experiencing strong temptations, discipline becomes automatic. There's no decision to make, no battle to fight, no energy to expend. You just naturally do the disciplined thing because the alternative doesn't even register as appealing. So how do you get there? How do you reduce desire intensity at the source instead of fighting it downstream? It starts with understanding that your brain's desire system isn't reacting to reality. It's reacting to predictions about reality. Your brain is constantly predicting how good things will feel based on past experiences, and those predictions drive your cravings. When you repeatedly give in to temptation and experience the reward, you strengthen the prediction. Your brain learns to expect intense pleasure, which generates intense desire. But here's the critical insight. When you change the pattern, when you stop reinforcing that prediction, the desire signal weakens over time. Not because you're suppressing it, but because your brain genuinely updates its prediction model. The key is consistency without resistance. Instead of fighting the urge and occasionally losing, you calmly redirect your attention before the desire fully forms. You don't engage with the temptation mentally. You don't debate whether to give in. You simply notice the initial signal and shift your focus elsewhere. This might sound like avoidance, but it's not. Avoidance implies the desire is there and you're running from it. What we're doing is preventing the desire from amplifying in the first place. Over time, maybe 2 to 3 weeks of consistent redirection, your brain stops generating strong desire signals because the predicted reward value decreases. The temptation loses its grip. And once that happens, discipline stops feeling like discipline. It just feels like living. This is what separates people who maintain discipline for decades from people who burn out after a few weeks. They're not fighting harder, they're not fighting at all. Cognitive load redistribution. Now that you understand how to stop generating temptations, let's talk about why you run out of discipline by the end of the day. You wake up with great intentions, you're motivated, you're ready to execute. Then by evening you're scrolling mindlessly, eating junk, skipping the workout. What happened? Did your willpower just evaporate? No. You burned through your cognitive bandwidth making thousands of tiny decisions that had nothing to do with your actual goals. This is cognitive load, and it's silently destroying your discipline without you even realizing it. Your brain has a finite amount of mental energy each day. Think of it like a battery that depletes with every decision you make, every choice you process, every option you evaluate. Should I check my phone now or later? What should I wear? What should I eat for breakfast? Do I respond to this message immediately or wait? These micro-decisions seem harmless, but each one drains a small amount of your cognitive resources. By the time you need discipline for something that actually matters, your battery is at 15% and your prefrontal cortex is basically offline. This is why most people fail at discipline in the evenings, not the mornings. It's not about motivation, it's about mental depletion. Here's what disciplined people figured out. They don't have more willpower than you. They just waste less of it on irrelevant decisions. They've engineered their lives to eliminate choice wherever choice doesn't add value. They've automated, systematized, and pre-decided everything that doesn't require active thinking. This frees up massive amounts of cognitive bandwidth for the things that actually move their lives forward. Let me give you a practical example. Every morning you wake up and decide what to do first. Check phone or shower? Coffee or exercise? Work immediately or breakfast first? Those aren't just innocent questions. Each one is a cognitive negotiation that burns mental energy and creates opportunities for distraction. But what if you didn't have to decide? What if your morning sequence was completely predetermined, so automatic that your brain could execute it in low power mode? No decisions, no negotiations, just a series of predetermined actions that flow into each other. That's cognitive load redistribution. You're taking energy away from pointless decision-making and redirecting it toward execution. The practical application here is ruthless. Look at your day and identify every repeated decision you make. Morning routine, work sequence, meal choices, evening wind down. Then eliminate the decision by creating a default. Not a rigid schedule that stresses you out, but a default pathway that your brain can follow without thinking. When you remove the choice, you remove the cognitive cost. Your environment plays a massive role here too. If your workspace has 20 different things competing for attention, your brain is constantly making micro-decisions about what to focus on. Should I look at my phone? Should I organize these papers? Should I respond to that notification? Each one pulls a tiny bit of cognitive energy. But if you engineer your environment so there's only one obvious thing to do, you eliminate those micro-negotiations entirely. This is why people work better in clean, minimal spaces. It's not about aesthetics. It's about reducing the number of decisions your environment forces you to make. The same principle applies to your digital environment. Every app on your home screen, every browser tab, every notification setting is either adding to your cognitive load or reducing it. Most people have their phones configured to maximize decision-making. Notifications constantly interrupt. Apps are designed to create choice paralysis. Everything is pulling for attention. Disciplined people configure their devices to minimize decisions. They turn off non-essential notifications, remove distracting apps from easy access, structure their digital environment so the disciplined choice is the default choice. Here's the key insight. Discipline isn't about making the right choice in the moment. It's about designing your life so the right choice is automatic. When you redistribute cognitive load away from meaningless decisions and toward meaningful execution, discipline stops feeling like a constant battle. You're not relying on willpower. You're relying on system design. And systems don't get tired. Systems don't have bad days. Systems just run. The reappraisal rewiring method. You've eliminated temptations and freed up your cognitive bandwidth. Now we need to address the elephant in the room. What happens when you actually have to do something hard? Because here's the brutal truth. You can optimize your environment perfectly, but at some point you still have to sit down and do the work that feels difficult, boring, or uncomfortable. Most people hit this wall and try to push through with motivation or discipline. That's the wrong approach. What you need instead is to change how your brain interprets the difficulty itself. This is called cognitive reappraisal, and it's one of the most powerful neuroscience-backed strategies for making hard things feel easier at a biological level. Here's how your brain currently works. When you face a challenging task, your amygdala immediately assesses it as a threat. Threat means stress. Stress triggers cortisol. Cortisol makes everything feel worse. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your thoughts spiral. Your brain interprets the difficulty as something to avoid, and every fiber of your nervous system is screaming at you to quit. This threat response is automatic, which is why motivation and willpower don't work. You're trying to override a survival mechanism with conscious intention. That's like trying to stop a freight train with your bare hands. But cognitive reappraisal works differently. Instead of fighting the response, you change the interpretation that creates the response. You teach your brain to see challenge as opportunity, difficulty as growth, discomfort as progress. When your brain reframes the meaning of hard work, the threat response doesn't activate in the first place. Let me be clear about what this isn't. This isn't positive thinking or fake affirmations. You're not lying to yourself saying everything is easy when it's not. You're genuinely changing the emotional meaning your brain assigns to effort. And when the meaning changes, the neurological response changes. The stress decreases, the resistance fades, and the task becomes psychologically easier even though the objective difficulty hasn't changed. So how do you actually do this? It starts with catching the automatic interpretation. When you sit down to work and feel that wave of resistance, that's your brain labeling the situation as threatening. The instinct is to ignore it or push through it. Don't. Acknowledge it. Notice that your brain is interpreting this as a threat. Then consciously reframe it, not with some generic positive statement, but with a specific truth that shifts the meaning. Instead of thinking this is hard and unpleasant, reframe it as this is hard, and that means it's working. The discomfort is proof that you're growing, that you're pushing past your previous limits. Your brain needs to learn that difficulty equals progress, not danger. The more you reinforce this reframe, the more your brain starts to automatically interpret challenge differently. Over time, what used to trigger a threat response starts triggering an opportunity response. Same stimulus, completely different neurological reaction. This is where the real magic happens. When your brain stops seeing hard work as a threat, your nervous system stops activating stress responses. Your cortisol stays low. Your prefrontal cortex stays online. You can think clearly, focus deeply, and execute effectively even when the task is objectively difficult. You're literally rewiring the emotional circuits that make discipline feel painful. But reappraisal only works if you do it consistently. Your brain doesn't rewire from one instance of reframing. It rewires from hundreds of instances where you consciously catch the automatic interpretation and replace it with a new one. This is pattern interruption at the neurological level. Every time you reframe, you weaken the old neural pathway and strengthen the new one. After a few weeks of consistent practice, the new interpretation becomes automatic. Here's a practical protocol. Every time you feel resistance to a task, pause for 3 seconds. Ask yourself, what story my brain is telling me about this right now? Usually it's some variation of this is going to be painful, this is going to fail, this isn't worth it. Then consciously replace it with a reframe that emphasizes growth, capability, or progress. This resistance means I'm about to level up. This difficulty is building my capacity. This discomfort is temporary, but the growth is permanent. The specific words matter less than the shift in meaning. What you're doing is teaching your amygdala that challenge is not a threat. It's a signal that you're expanding. And when your brain truly believes that at a subconscious level, discipline stops feeling like suffering. It starts feeling like evolution. Situation selection. Engineering reframing makes hard things easier, but here's an even more powerful truth. The best battle is the one you never have to fight. You can train your brain to interpret difficulty differently, but what if you could design your life so most of those difficulties never reach you in the first place? This is situation selection engineering, and it's the discipline strategy that separates masters from everyone else. Think about your typical day. How many times do you have to actively resist something? How many moments require you to choose the disciplined option over the easy one? If the answer is more than a handful, you're doing discipline wrong. You're putting yourself in situations where temptation and distraction are present, then relying on willpower to save you. That's not strategy, that's gambling. Here's what most people miss. Discipline isn't about winning battles. It's about controlling which battles you encounter. If you're constantly surrounded by junk food, you'll constantly have to resist junk food. If your phone is always within reach, you'll constantly have to resist checking it. If your environment is full of friction for good behaviors and zero friction for bad ones, you're going to lose eventually no matter how strong your willpower is. Situation selection means you deliberately choose which situations you expose yourself to based on whether they support or undermine your goals. You don't rely on self-control in the moment. You use self-control once earlier in the chain to set up situations where discipline is automatic. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you're trying to avoid social media during work hours. The typical approach is to keep your phone on your desk and try not to look at it. Every few minutes, your brain sends a little impulse to check it, and you have to consciously resist. That's dozens of micro battles throughout the day, each one draining willpower. But situation selection says put the phone in another room entirely. Now the battle doesn't happen. The impulse might still arise, but acting on it requires getting up, walking to another room, unlocking the phone. That friction is usually enough to break the automaticity. You're not resisting temptation. You're making temptation inaccessible. The same principle applies to every area of life. If you want to eat healthier, don't keep junk food in your house. Not because you lack willpower, but because having it there means you'll face dozens of decisions every day about whether to eat it. Remove it entirely, and those decisions disappear. If you want to work out consistently, choose a gym that's on your route home from work, not one that requires a special trip. The situation you select determines whether discipline is easy or hard. This goes deeper than physical environment. It includes the people you spend time with, the content you consume, the routines you follow, the commitments you make. Every situation either makes discipline easier or harder. Most people drift into situations randomly based on convenience or social pressure, then wonder why discipline feels impossible. Disciplined people are ruthlessly selective about which situations they allow into their lives. They ask a simple question: does this situation make my goals easier or harder? If it makes them harder, they redesign the situation or avoid it entirely. This isn't about being antisocial or rigid. It's about being strategic. You have limited willpower and unlimited potential temptations. You cannot win through resistance alone, but you can win by controlling exposure. Here's the practical protocol. Map out your day and identify every moment where you currently have to resist something or make a disciplined choice. Morning phone check, snacking between meals, staying focused during work, going to bed on time. Each one is a situation where discipline is required. Then ask, how can I redesign this situation so the disciplined choice is automatic? Maybe you leave your phone charging in the bathroom overnight so you can't check it first thing. Maybe you only buy groceries that align with your eating goals, so there's nothing unhealthy to snack on. Maybe you use website blockers during work hours, so distracting sites are literally inaccessible. Maybe you set an alarm for bedtime that automatically dims your lights and locks your devices. These aren't tricks or hacks, they're engineering principles applied to behavior. You're designing situations where the default path is the disciplined path. And when discipline is the default, it stops requiring effort. The resistance disappears because the temptation never fully forms. This is the ultimate form of self-control, using control once to set up your life so you don't need control constantly. It's front-loading discipline so your future self can coast. Neuroplasticity acceleration protocol. You've engineered your situations to minimize temptation. Now let's talk about speed, because everything we've discussed so far requires your brain to rewire itself, and that rewiring takes time. The question is, how much time? For most people, building a new habit takes anywhere from 2 to 8 months of consistent effort. That's a long time to white-knuckle your way through something before it becomes automatic. But here's what neuroscience has discovered. You can dramatically accelerate the rewiring process if you understand how neuroplasticity actually works. Your brain isn't constantly plastic. It has windows, specific periods where it's primed to form new connections rapidly. If you know how to trigger those windows and what to do during them, you can hardwire new behaviors in weeks instead of months. Let's start with the basics. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural pathways. Every time you repeat a behavior, you strengthen the pathway associated with that behavior. Do it enough times, and the pathway becomes so strong that the behavior feels automatic. That's habit formation at the neurological level. But here's the critical part. Not all repetitions are equal. Your brain doesn't rewire just because you do something repeatedly. It rewires when repetition is combined with focused attention and some level of challenge or novelty. If you're doing something on autopilot, barely paying attention, your brain isn't forming strong new connections. You need to be mentally engaged during the behavior for plasticity to occur. This is why people can do the same morning routine for years without it ever becoming truly automatic. They're going through the motions without focused attention, so the neural pathway never fully solidifies. But when you bring conscious awareness to each repetition, when you pay attention to what you're doing and how you're doing it, the pathway strengthens much faster. Here's the protocol. When you're building a new disciplined behavior, treat the first 3 weeks as your neuroplasticity window. During this period, every single repetition matters exponentially more than it will later. You cannot afford to be inconsistent. You cannot afford to zone out and go through the motions. Each repetition needs to be deliberate, focused, and mentally engaged. Before you do the behavior, take 5 seconds to set an intention. Tell yourself exactly what you're about to do and why it matters. This activates your prefrontal cortex and primes your brain for learning. Then during the behavior, maintain awareness. Notice the physical sensations, the thoughts that arise, the resistance you feel. This conscious attention signals to your brain that this action is important and worth encoding strongly. After the behavior, take another 5 seconds to acknowledge completion. This creates a sense of closure and reinforces the neural pathway. This might sound tedious, but remember, you only need to do this for a few weeks. Once the pathway is established, the behavior will run automatically without requiring this level of attention. You're investing extra mental effort up front to create permanent automaticity later. Timing also matters. Your brain is most plastic right after waking up and right before sleep. These are your golden windows for encoding new behaviors. If possible, schedule your most important disciplined actions during these times. The neural encoding will be stronger and the habit will form faster. There's also something called massed practice versus distributed practice. Massed practice means doing a lot of repetitions in a short time. Distributed practice means spacing them out over longer periods. For neuroplasticity, distributed practice wins. Your brain needs time between repetitions to consolidate the new connections. This is why doing something once daily for 3 weeks is far more effective than doing it 20 times in one day. The spacing allows the neural pathway to strengthen between sessions. Here's another accelerator, pairing the new behavior with something your brain already does automatically. This is called habit stacking, but the neuroscience behind it is pathway piggybacking. Your established habits already have strong neural pathways. When you attach a new behavior to an existing one, the new behavior can leverage the existing pathway structure, which speeds up the encoding process dramatically. For example, if you want to build a meditation habit, don't try to create it from scratch. Attach it to something you already do automatically, like brushing your teeth. After I brush my teeth, I meditate for 5 minutes. The existing pathway for toothbrushing becomes the trigger for the new meditation pathway, and the association strengthens both. One more critical factor: sleep. Your brain consolidates new neural connections during deep sleep. If you're sleep deprived, your neuroplasticity is severely compromised. All the effort you put into building new behaviors gets partially wasted because your brain doesn't have enough quality sleep time to solidify the pathways. Protecting your sleep during the neuroplasticity window isn't optional. It's essential. The attentional deployment shield. Your brain is rewiring faster now, but there's still a vulnerability. Even with perfect situations and strong neural pathways, temptations will occasionally break through. A notification appears, a craving surfaces, a distraction enters your field of vision. In that moment, you have about 3 seconds before the temptation fully captures your attention and triggers the desire cascade. What you do in those 3 seconds determines whether you maintain discipline or spiral into distraction. This is attentional deployment, and it's your last line of defense against the temptations that slip through your other systems. Most people don't realize that attention is a skill you can train. They think attention just happens automatically, that you either focus or you don't. But attention is actually something you can consciously direct, and the speed at which you redirect it determines your level of discipline. Here's how the process works. A potential distraction enters your awareness. Maybe you hear your phone buzz, maybe you smell food, maybe a thought about checking social media pops into your mind. At this initial stage, it's just a signal. It hasn't captured your attention yet. Your brain has registered it, but you haven't engaged with it. This is the critical moment. If you let your attention move toward the distraction, if you look at the phone or think about the food, or open the social media app in your mind, you've lost. Once attention fully engages, desire amplifies rapidly. The dopamine system activates. The prefrontal cortex starts rationalizing. Within seconds, you're either giving in or burning willpower to resist. But if you redirect your attention immediately, before it fully engages with the distraction, the desire never amplifies. The signal fades, the temptation dissolves. You don't have to resist anything because there's nothing to resist yet. This is the attentional deployment shield. You're not blocking distractions from existing. You're preventing your attention from feeding them. Think of attention like a spotlight. Whatever you shine it on becomes amplified in your consciousness. Shine it on a distraction and the distraction grows. Shine it on your work and the work becomes engaging. The discipline isn't in resisting the distraction. The discipline is in controlling where the spotlight points. So how do you train this? It starts with building awareness of where your attention is moment to moment. Most people are completely unconscious of their attention. It just bounces around randomly based on whatever stimulus is loudest. They have no idea what they're paying attention to until they suddenly realize they've been scrolling for 20 minutes. You need to develop what's called metacognition, which is awareness of your own mental processes. Throughout your day, pause every few minutes and ask yourself, what am I paying attention to right now? Not in a judgmental way, just noticing. Am I focused on my work? Am I thinking about something irrelevant? Am I being pulled toward a distraction? This simple practice of checking in builds the awareness muscle. Once you have awareness, you can start practicing redirection. The moment you notice your attention drifting towards something that doesn't serve you, you consciously pull it back. Not forcefully, not with frustration, just calmly and immediately redirecting the spotlight back to where you want it. At first, this will feel clunky and deliberate. You'll catch yourself after your attention has already been captured. That's normal, but with practice, the redirection becomes faster. You start catching the drift earlier in the process. Eventually, you catch it at the initial signal stage, before attention fully engages. That's when discipline becomes effortless. Here's a practical technique. Use a physical anchor to reset your attention. When you notice your attention drifting, take one deep breath and touch your thumb to your index finger. This physical action interrupts the automatic pattern and gives your brain a clear signal to redirect. Over time, this becomes an instant reset button. Attention drifts, you breathe and touch, attention returns. Another powerful strategy is pre-commitment of attention. Before you start a work session, decide exactly where your attention will go for the next block of time. Not just what task you'll work on, but specifically where your mental focus will be directed. I'm going to focus on writing this paragraph, or I'm going to focus on solving this problem. When you pre-commit, your brain has a clear target. Any attention drift becomes immediately obvious because you have a reference point. Without pre-commitment, attention wanders, and you don't even notice because there's no standard to compare against. The attentional deployment shield also gets stronger the more you use it. Every time you successfully redirect your attention away from a distraction, you're strengthening the neural pathway that controls attentional control. Every time you fail to redirect and get pulled into distraction, you're strengthening the pathway that leads to distraction. This is why some people seem naturally focused while others are constantly scattered. It's not innate talent. It's accumulated training in attentional control. Start treating attention like a muscle. Every moment is a rep. Every redirection is building strength. Every time you let attention drift unchecked, you're weakening the muscle. Over weeks and months, this training transforms your baseline level of focus. Distractions that used to derail you for hours barely register. Your attention becomes stable, directed, under your control. Reverse incentive architecture. You've learned to control your attention, but let's address something deeper. Your brain's entire motivation system is built on incentives. You do things that feel rewarding and avoid things that feel punishing. This seems obvious, but here's the problem. Right now, your brain is wired backwards. Undisciplined behaviors feel more rewarding than disciplined ones. Scrolling feels better than working. Junk food feels better than healthy food. Staying up late feels better than going to bed on time. As long as this incentive structure exists, discipline will always require effort. You'll always be fighting your own reward system. But what if you could reverse it? What if you could rewire your brain so disciplined behaviors became genuinely more satisfying than undisciplined ones? This isn't about forcing yourself to enjoy things you hate. It's about manipulating your brain's reward prediction system so the neurological pleasure you get from discipline exceeds the pleasure you get from distraction. Let me explain how reward prediction works. Your brain doesn't actually reward you for doing things. It rewards you based on how much better or worse something is than you expected. This is called a prediction error. If you expect something to be moderately good and it's amazing, you get a huge dopamine hit. But if you expect something to be amazing and it's just okay, you actually feel disappointed, even though the experience was objectively positive. Your brain is constantly making predictions about how rewarding things will be, and those predictions determine how much pleasure you actually experience. Here's where it gets interesting. Right now, your brain predicts that checking your phone will be highly rewarding. Maybe you'll see an interesting notification or message. That prediction causes dopamine to release in anticipation, which creates the craving. Then you check your phone, and most of the time it's nothing special, but your brain's prediction doesn't update properly because occasionally you do get something rewarding. That intermittent reinforcement keeps the prediction high. This is why phone checking feels so compelling even though it rarely delivers real satisfaction. Your brain keeps predicting a reward that doesn't consistently arrive. The same pattern applies to junk food, social media, and every other undisciplined behavior. Your brain overestimates the reward, which makes the craving strong, but the actual experience often falls short. Meanwhile, your brain underestimates the reward of disciplined behaviors. You predict that working on your project will be boring and effortful, so there's no anticipatory dopamine. You predict that eating healthy food will be bland and unsatisfying. These low predictions make you not want to do these things. But here's the reversal strategy. You're going to systematically retrain your brain's predictions. First, you need to lower the predicted reward for undisciplined behaviors. The way you do this is by bringing full conscious awareness to the experience when you do engage in them. Next time you check your phone mindlessly, don't just scroll. Actually pay attention to how it feels. Notice the emptiness. Notice how it doesn't actually deliver the satisfaction your brain promised. Notice the slight disappointment. By bringing awareness to the gap between prediction and reality, you help your brain update its model. Over time, the predicted reward decreases because your brain learns that this behavior consistently overpromises and underdelivers. Do this with every undisciplined behavior. When you eat junk food, actually taste it instead of mindlessly consuming it. Often you'll notice it's not as good as your brain predicted. When you stay up scrolling, notice the tiredness and emptiness. Conscious awareness helps your brain learn that these behaviors aren't as rewarding as it thinks. Now the second part. You need to increase the predicted reward for disciplined behaviors. The way you do this is by amplifying your awareness of positive outcomes when you do them. When you finish a work session, don't just move on. Take 30 seconds to notice how you feel. Notice the sense of accomplishment. Notice the mental clarity. Notice the pride. By consciously recognizing and savoring these positive feelings, you're training your brain to associate disciplined behavior with genuine reward. The key is consistency. Your brain's prediction system updates slowly through repeated experiences. If you do this awareness practice every single time for a few weeks, your brain will start to genuinely predict that disciplined behaviors lead to satisfaction. And when the prediction changes, the motivation changes. You'll start craving the work session because your brain has learned it delivers real reward. You'll stop craving the phone check because your brain has learned it's mostly empty. This is the reverse incentive architecture. You're not fighting your motivation system. You're reprogramming it, so it naturally drives you toward discipline instead of away from it. There's one more layer to this. You can artificially boost the reward signal for disciplined behaviors by pairing them with genuine pleasures. Listen to music you love while working out. Drink your favorite tea while doing deep work. Create environmental cues that make disciplined activities more pleasant. Your brain will start associating discipline with pleasure, which strengthens the positive prediction. The goal is to reach a tipping point where your brain genuinely wants to do the disciplined thing more than the undisciplined thing. Not because you're forcing it, because the incentive structure has reversed, the cultivation over production model. Your reward system is reversing, but now we need to talk about sustainability. Because here's where most people destroy their discipline. They treat themselves like machines. They optimize for maximum output, push for constant productivity, measure everything by how much they produce. This works for a while, then it doesn't. You burn out, lose motivation, and all that discipline collapses. The problem isn't that you weren't disciplined enough. The problem is you were using the wrong model entirely. Discipline isn't about grinding harder. It's about cultivating capacity. Think about a farmer. A farmer doesn't extract maximum value from the soil every single day. That would deplete the land and destroy future harvests. Instead, the farmer cultivates the soil, plants cover crops, rotates fields, allows periods of rest. The farmer understands that long-term abundance requires investing in the system's capacity, not just extracting from it. Your brain and body work the same way. When you push for maximum productivity every day, you're depleting your mental and physical resources faster than they can regenerate. You're extracting without cultivating. And just like depleted soil, eventually you have nothing left to give. This is why productivity culture fails most people. It's built on an extraction model that ignores regeneration. The cultivation model is different. It asks a simple question. What does my system need to maintain and expand its capacity over time? Not what can I squeeze out of myself today, but what do I need to invest in myself so I'm stronger next month than I am now? This completely changes how you approach discipline. Instead of measuring success by how many hours you worked or how many tasks you completed, you measure it by whether you're building or depleting capacity. Did you sleep enough? Did you move your body? Did you give your brain rest periods? Did you engage in activities that restore mental energy instead of just consuming it? These aren't luxuries or rewards for good behavior. They're essential investments in your disciplined capacity. Here's what this looks like practically. You don't schedule your day for maximum output. You schedule it for sustainable capacity expansion. That means you work in focused blocks with genuine recovery between them. Not fake recovery where you scroll your phone. Real recovery where your prefrontal cortex actually gets to rest. Walking, stretching, sitting quietly. Anything that doesn't demand active cognitive processing. You also stop glorifying sleep deprivation and overwork. These aren't signs of discipline. They're signs of poor system management. Someone who sleeps 7 hours and works focused for 4 is far more disciplined than someone who sleeps 5 hours and grinds for 12. The first person is cultivating capacity. The second person is destroying it. The cultivation model also means you prioritize activities that build long-term capability over short-term output. Reading, learning, skill development, strategic thinking. These don't produce immediate results, but they expand what you're capable of in the future. Most people skip these because they don't feel productive in the moment. But this is exactly backwards. These activities are the foundation of sustained high performance. Another critical piece, creative rest. Your brain needs unstructured time where it's not focused on any specific task. This is when your default mode network activates and does the background processing that leads to insights, creativity, and problem solving. When you fill every moment with productivity, you never give this system time to run. You become efficient at execution, but terrible at innovation and strategic thinking. Schedule time for walking without podcasts, showering without planning, sitting without devices. This isn't wasted time. It's cultivation time. Your brain is working in ways that focused effort can't replicate. Here's the paradox that makes this so powerful. When you shift from production mode to cultivation mode, your actual output often increases, not despite the rest, but because of it. You have more mental energy for deep work. Your thinking is clearer. Your decisions are better. You can sustain intensity longer because you're not constantly depleted. The people who seem effortlessly disciplined for decades aren't pushing harder than everyone else. They're cultivating better. They understand that discipline is a capacity that needs maintenance and investment, not just a resource to extract. Start thinking of yourself as a system that needs care, not a machine that needs to maximize output. Ask what would make me more capable next month. What investments in rest, health, learning, and recovery will compound over time? When you optimize for capacity instead of productivity, discipline becomes sustainable. You're no longer riding motivation waves that eventually crash. You're building a foundation that gets stronger the longer you maintain it. Inhibition, cost elimination. You're cultivating capacity now, but there's still a hidden tax draining your discipline every single day. It's called inhibition cost, and most people have no idea how much it's costing them. Every time you resist a temptation through pure willpower, you pay a psychological price. That moment of resistance feels small, barely noticeable, but those moments add up. By the end of the day, you've paid the inhibition tax dozens of times, and your mental resources are depleted. This is why willpower-based discipline eventually fails everyone. You're constantly paying a cost that accumulates faster than you can recover from it. Here's what's happening neurologically. When you inhibit an impulse, your prefrontal cortex has to actively suppress signals from your limbic system. This suppression requires energy. Real metabolic energy in the form of glucose and neurotransmitters. Each instance of inhibition depletes your prefrontal resources slightly. 1 or 2 moments of resistance? No problem. But 30 or 40 throughout the day. Your prefrontal cortex is running on fumes by evening, which is exactly when most people's discipline collapses. The inhibition cost explains why you can be disciplined all day at work, then come home and immediately fall apart. It's not weakness, it's depletion. You've been paying the inhibition tax all day, and by the time you get home, you literally don't have the neurological resources left to keep paying it. Most discipline advice ignores this completely. It tells you to build more willpower, to resist harder, to push through. But that's like telling someone to run faster when they're already exhausted. You can't willpower your way out of a willpower depletion problem. What you need instead is to eliminate the cost at the source. Stop using inhibition-based discipline entirely. Replace it with strategies that prevent the impulse from forming in the first place, so there's nothing to inhibit. This is where everything we've covered comes together. Situation selection eliminates temptations before they reach you. No temptation means no impulse means no inhibition cost. Attentional deployment redirects your focus before desire amplifies. You're not suppressing a craving. You're preventing the craving from forming. Reverse incentive architecture makes undisciplined options genuinely less appealing. You're not resisting them. You just don't want them as much. Each of these strategies reduces or eliminates inhibition cost. But there's another layer we need to address: the impulses that still break through despite all your defenses. These are the moments where you feel the urge and you're about to engage in the internal negotiation about whether to give in or resist. This negotiation itself is costly. The back and forth uses cognitive resources. Should I check my phone? No, I shouldn't. But maybe just quickly. No, stay focused. But what if it's important? This internal argument can go on for minutes, burning mental energy the entire time. Here's the solution. Eliminate the negotiation entirely with pre-committed rules. A rule is different from a decision. Decisions happen in the moment and require deliberation. Rules are predetermined and require no deliberation. When you've established a clear rule, there's no internal debate. The rule decides for you. For example, instead of deciding each time whether you should check your phone during work, you create a rule. No phone checks during work blocks. Now when the impulse arises, there's no negotiation. The rule is the rule. Your brain doesn't waste energy debating because the answer is already decided. This might sound rigid, but it's actually liberating. Rules eliminate the cognitive burden of repeated decision-making. They create clarity, and clarity is cheap neurologically. Ambiguity is expensive. Every time you have to weigh options, evaluate trade-offs, and make a judgment call, you're paying inhibition cost. But when you follow a clear rule, the cost disappears. The key is making your rules specific and absolute. Vague intentions like "I'll try to eat healthier" create constant negotiation. Is this healthy enough? How much is too much? Clear rules like "I don't eat dessert on weekdays" eliminate negotiation. There's no gray area to debate. Now here's the advanced technique. Build your rules during high-resource moments, then rely on them during low-resource moments. When you're fresh and clear-headed, that's when you decide what your rules will be. You're not making these decisions when you're tired and depleted. You're making them when your prefrontal cortex is fully online and capable of good judgment. Then during the day, when you're depleted and tempted, you simply follow the rules your high-resource self already established. You're not trying to make good decisions in the moment. You're executing decisions that were already made for you. This is how you eliminate inhibition cost. You're not suppressing impulses. You're not negotiating with temptation. You're not relying on moment-to-moment willpower. You're operating from a system of clear rules that remove the need for costly inhibition. Over time, following these rules becomes automatic. The pathway gets encoded. You stop even experiencing the impulse because your brain learns that certain options are simply not on the table. And when impulses stop arising, inhibition cost drops to zero. Desire suppression through anticipation. You've eliminated most inhibition costs. But let's go even deeper into the craving mechanism itself, because even with perfect rules and situations, your brain will still generate desires. That's its job. Your limbic system is constantly scanning for immediate rewards and pushing you toward them. The question isn't whether desires will arise, it's whether those desires will be strong enough to override your discipline. And that strength depends entirely on how your brain processes time. Right now, your brain is terrible at anticipating future consequences. When you're faced with temptation, your brain vividly imagines the immediate pleasure but barely registers the future cost. The cookie feels intensely real. The regret you'll feel later feels abstract and distant. This temporal discounting is why people make decisions they know they'll regret. The future version of the consequence doesn't feel real enough to compete with the present version of the temptation. But here's what changes everything. You can train your brain to make future consequences feel immediate. When you do this successfully, the craving loses its power because your brain simultaneously experiences both the immediate pleasure and the future pain. And when both are equally vivid, discipline becomes the obvious choice. This is desire suppression through anticipation. You're not fighting the craving. You're adding information to it that changes its emotional weight. Let me show you how this works. Imagine you're craving junk food right now. Your brain is generating vivid sensory predictions about how good it will taste, how satisfying it will feel. Those predictions create desire. Now, most people either give in to the desire or try to suppress it through willpower. Both approaches ignore the real problem. Your brain is only processing half the equation. Here's what you do instead. When the craving hits, you don't fight it. You expand it. You bring the future consequence into the present moment with the same vividness as the temptation. Close your eyes for 5 seconds and actually imagine how you'll feel 30 minutes after eating that junk food. Not the concept of feeling bad, the actual physical sensation, the sluggishness, the regret, the disappointment in yourself. Make it as real and detailed as the craving itself. What happens neurologically is fascinating. Your brain's predictive system processes both timelines simultaneously. The immediate reward and the future consequence both become emotionally present. And when your brain can feel both outcomes at once, it naturally weights them properly. The junk food doesn't suddenly seem worth the cost because the cost feels just as real as the reward. This isn't guilt or shame. Those emotions come after the behavior. What we're doing is bringing the natural consequence forward in time, so your brain experiences it during the decision, not after. It's anticipatory learning compressed into a single moment. The more you practice this, the faster and more automatic it becomes. Eventually, you don't need to consciously visualize the consequence. Your brain has learned to automatically activate future outcome predictions whenever a craving arises. The temptation and its consequence show up together, which dramatically reduces the temptation's power. Here's the advanced version. You can also use this in reverse to amplify motivation for disciplined behaviors. When you don't feel like working out, your brain is predicting the immediate discomfort but not the future benefit. So you deliberately bring that future benefit into the present. Visualize how you'll feel after the workout. The energy, the pride, the physical vitality. Make it vivid enough that your brain experiences it as a present reality, not a distant possibility. Now the decision shifts. It's not present discomfort versus future benefit. It's present discomfort with immediate emotional reward versus giving up and feeling regret. When framed that way, the disciplined choice becomes compelling. The key to making this work is specificity and sensory detail. Generic thoughts like "I'll regret this" don't activate your brain's emotional prediction system strongly enough. You need specific embodied predictions. "I'll feel bloated and sluggish. My stomach will hurt. I'll lie in bed tonight wishing I hadn't eaten this." The more specific and sensory the prediction, the more real it feels. There's a neurological reason this works. Your brain uses the same neural systems to imagine the future as it does to remember the past or experience the present. When you vividly imagine a future state, your brain partially activates the same regions that would fire if you were actually experiencing it. This is why visualization can create real emotional responses. You're essentially giving your brain a preview of the future that feels emotionally present. Practice this technique every time you face temptation or lack motivation. At first, it requires conscious effort. You have to deliberately stop and visualize. But after a few weeks of consistent practice, the process becomes automatic. Your brain learns to instantly generate future outcome predictions whenever a decision point arises. And when your brain can anticipate consequences with the same vividness, it anticipates rewards. Desire suppression happens naturally. You're not resisting cravings. You're making them less compelling by adding the full picture of what they actually cost. The MTR Reset Framework. Your brain can now anticipate consequences in real time, but there's one final piece missing. Because no matter how optimized your discipline systems are, you still operate in cycles. Your mental resources fluctuate. Your cognitive capacity varies throughout the day and week. Your creativity and problem-solving ability rise and fall. Most people ignore these cycles and try to maintain constant intensity. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of how human performance works. What you need instead is a framework that works with your natural rhythms rather than against them. This is the MTR Reset Framework. Movement, thought, and rest are strategic tools for resetting and amplifying your disciplined capacity. Let's start with movement. Your brain isn't separate from your body. They're one integrated system. When your body is stagnant, your brain becomes stagnant. Neural activity patterns get stuck. Blood flow decreases. Neurotransmitter production slows. This is why you can sit at your desk for hours feeling mentally blocked, then take a 10-minute walk and suddenly have complete clarity. The movement resets your nervous system. Movement doesn't just burn calories or build muscle. It fundamentally changes your brain state. Physical activity increases cerebral blood flow, which delivers oxygen and glucose to your prefrontal cortex. It triggers the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports neuroplasticity. It activates your sympathetic nervous system in a way that enhances alertness and focus. When you're feeling mentally depleted or stuck, movement is the fastest reset available. Not intense exercise necessarily, just movement, walking, stretching, standing and moving your body through space. This shifts your physiological state, which shifts your cognitive state. Here's the protocol. Every 90 minutes of cognitive work, take a movement break. Not a sit and scroll break, a genuine movement break where you get your body moving for at least 5 minutes. This aligns with your ultradian rhythms, which are the natural 90-minute cycles of high and low alertness your body runs on throughout the day. Working straight through these cycles depletes you faster. Working with them by taking movement resets maintains high performance for much longer. Now thought, your brain needs dedicated time for unstructured thinking, not focused problem solving, not consuming information, just thinking, processing, integrating. Most people never do this. Their minds are constantly occupied with inputs, podcasts during commutes, articles during breaks, videos during meals. There's never time where the brain is simply allowed to think without external stimulation. This constant input prevents your default mode network from doing its job. This network activates during rest and mind wandering, and it's responsible for memory consolidation, self-reflection, and creative insight. When you never give it space to run, your thinking becomes shallow. You can execute tasks, but you can't see patterns, generate insights, or think strategically. Schedule thought time into your week. 30 minutes where you sit with a notebook and just think. No agenda, no inputs, just you and your thoughts. Let your mind wander through problems, ideas, observations. Write down what emerges. This isn't wasted time. This is when your brain does the deep processing that makes everything else more effective. You'll solve problems you've been stuck on for weeks. You'll see connections you couldn't see before. You'll gain clarity on decisions that felt impossible. Finally, rest. Real rest, not fake rest. Fake rest is scrolling your phone, watching mindless content, or staying busy with low-value activities. Your body is inactive, but your brain is still processing stimulation. Real rest is when both body and mind are genuinely at ease. This is when your nervous system fully recovers. The problem is most people have forgotten how to rest. They feel guilty doing nothing. They get uncomfortable with stillness. So they fill every moment with something, which means they never actually recover. And without recovery, capacity degrades over time. You need to relearn rest as a skill. Start with 10 minutes of genuine rest per day, lying down with no devices, sitting quietly without agenda. Not meditating necessarily, though that works too. Just being still and allowing your nervous system to settle. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which handles recovery and regeneration. Over time, increase this to 20 or 30 minutes. You'll notice that your capacity for focused work increases proportionally. The rest isn't taking away from productive time. It's creating the conditions that make productive time more effective. Here's how these three elements work together. Movement resets your state when you're stuck or depleted. Thought creates space for integration and insight. Rest allows deep recovery and capacity building. When you strategically deploy all three throughout your week, you maintain high-level discipline without burning out. You're working with your biology instead of overriding it. Most people only have one mode: push. They push until they collapse, then they recover minimally and push again. The MTR framework gives you 3 additional modes that prevent collapse and amplify performance. You're not just grinding. You're resetting, integrating, and recovering as part of the disciplined process itself. This is what sustainable high performance looks like. Not constant intensity, but strategic cycling between effort and restoration. The discipline isn't in pushing harder, It's in knowing when to move, when to think, and when to rest. The point of no return. Everything you've learned up to this point has been building towards something irreversible. You've reduced temptation intensity. You've freed up cognitive bandwidth. You've rewired emotional responses. You've engineered your situations. You've accelerated neuroplasticity. You've mastered attentional control. You've reversed your incentive structure. You've cultivated capacity instead of extracting it. You've eliminated inhibition costs. You've trained future consequence anticipation. You've integrated movement, thought, and rest into your discipline system. Each one of these strategies is powerful individually. But when they compound together, something remarkable happens. You cross a threshold, a point of no return where your old undisciplined self becomes psychologically and neurologically inaccessible. Let me explain what this means. Right now, even with all these tools, part of you probably still identifies with your old patterns. You remember being undisciplined. You can imagine slipping back into those behaviors. There's still a version of you that exists in your mind where discipline is hard and you're fighting to maintain it. But there's a transformation that happens when these systems run long enough. Your brain doesn't just develop new patterns, it fundamentally reorganizes its identity structure. The neural pathways associated with your old self weaken from disuse. The pathways associated with your disciplined self become your new baseline. And at some point, usually around 3 to 6 months of consistent implementation, your brain completes the reorganization. The old you isn't just dormant, it's gone. Think about someone who used to smoke but quit years ago. At first, quitting is hard. They're constantly fighting cravings, thinking about cigarettes, using willpower to resist. But after enough time, something shifts. They don't think of themselves as someone who's trying not to smoke. They think of themselves as a non-smoker. The craving circuitry has atrophied. The identity has changed. Going back to smoking wouldn't feel like returning to an old habit. It would feel like becoming a different person. That's the point of no return. And it happens with discipline too. When you consistently apply these 12 strategies, your brain rewires so thoroughly that being undisciplined stops being an option your nervous system naturally generates. It's not that you're resisting temptation. It's that your brain has fundamentally changed what it considers normal. Here's what this feels like experientially. You stop having internal battles about whether to do the disciplined thing. The question just doesn't arise. Working out isn't something you debate. It's just what you do. Eating well isn't a constant negotiation. It's your default. Staying focused during work isn't a struggle. It's your natural state. This isn't about being perfect or never facing challenges. It's about discipline becoming so integrated into your identity that the opposite feels foreign. Other people will notice this shift before you fully recognize it yourself. They'll comment that you seem different, more consistent, more reliable, more focused. They'll ask how you stay so disciplined, and you'll struggle to answer, because from your perspective, you're not doing anything special. You're just being yourself. And that's exactly the point. Discipline has stopped being something you do and become something you are. This transformation separates the top 1% from everyone else. Most people never cross this threshold because they never implement comprehensive systems long enough for the reorganization to complete. They use motivation and willpower, which work temporarily, then they slide back when those resources deplete. They never build the interconnected framework that creates permanent change. But you now have that framework. Every strategy in this video is a piece of the system that creates irreversible transformation. The question is whether you'll implement it consistently enough to cross the threshold. Because here's the truth. On the other side of this point of no return, life is fundamentally different. You don't wake up wondering if you'll be disciplined today. You don't fight yourself constantly. You don't feel like you're always one bad day away from losing everything. You just operate at a level that used to require enormous effort, except now it's effortless. Your goals stop being things you hope to achieve and start being inevitable outcomes of who you are. This is the ultimate promise of everything we've covered. Not that discipline becomes slightly easier, that it becomes automatic, not that you have to fight less, that you stop fighting entirely, not that you become a better version of your old self, that you become a fundamentally different person who can't go back even if you wanted to. So here's what happens next. You take these 12 strategies and you implement them. Not all at once necessarily, but systematically over the next few months. You focus on one or two until they become automatic. Then you layer in the next ones. You trust the process even when the changes feel slow. And you watch as your brain gradually reorganizes itself into a system where discipline is the path of least resistance. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, you'll look back at who you are today and barely recognize that person. The struggles that feel real right now will seem incomprehensible. The discipline that feels hard will feel natural. And you'll realize you've crossed a threshold that permanently separates you from the person you used to be. That's the point of no return. And once you're there, everything changes.